So again, this is what we're gonna do after we're done going over the story. All right, something I want to just review really fast is just the different types of conflict that exist in a story. Right, so most stories will have at least, um, well, they're all going to have at least one conflict, but sometimes in a story you'll see multiple types of conflict. So I'm just going to go over like the 5 major types again really quick, just to show you that you guys are aware of them. So I'm not even going to like show examples. I'll just explain it real fast. So your main type of conflict that you see in most stories is that there's a character who's having some sort of problem with another character, right? That's one type of conflict. The second type of conflict is when you have a character dealing with some sort of natural issue, right? So anything that's nature related, it could be like a storm. So obviously the Out of the Dust and Interstellar both dealt with character versus nature, right? So the the planet was basically making their lives miserable. So the basically was dust storms essentially, and running out of food and all the scientific stuff that the people were dealing with in outer space would be considered nature. Um, Another type of conflict would be character versus society. So the story, The Pedestrian, where the guy's outside and he's being treated like crap because he's doing that. That's character versus society. He's not dealing with another character. He's dealing with society trying to control him. Right. So that's a different type of conflict you might see. Other type is some sort of technological or supernatural. Right. Um, it's a little bit harder to see this. This is more like science fiction stories where you'll see this pop out. Right. Some sort of um, like monsters or whatever else, or death, or just like technology increasing. It's not as You don't see this as much in most stories. And then the last type of conflict is when a character is trying to deal with their own issues, right? So they're trying to deal with working out what's the best solution for themselves and whatever problems that they might be having. So what I want us to make sure that we're doing is just keep an eye out for these types of conflict as we're reading this novel, right? So what is the problems that Luke faces? Are the problems that Luke's facing inside or outside of him, right? So obviously, so far we've seen a little bit of character versus self, right? So he's trying to deal with the stress of his life changing. We always obviously see character versus society a little bit, right? Because his life is being changed and he has no control over it. Um, you saw a little bit of character versus character, right? He was beefing with his brother a little bit. So as we're reading the story, just try to pay attention to the different types of conflict and how they show themselves. All right, so we're gonna read. What is it here? Now, I'll do this a little bit different today, just to kind of speed things up. So open this thing up. Make sure you have this thing open. So these are the questions that we're gonna look for as we read. So instead of you guys having to worry about finding the answers as we are reading it, you should be answering it. So that way you're getting more work done in a shorter period of time. All right, so if you look at the questions, first one is, why doesn't Luke try to listen to the conversation at the kitchen table from the steps? That's the first question. Second one is, why does the Garner family have to sell their pigs? Third one is, why is Luke's mom upset about the tax bill? And the last question is, what is Luke's mom planning on doing? So let us see as we read the answer to these preguntas. All right, so we're on chapter 5. Make sure you are on chapter 5 with me. Cinco. All right. Remember the end of the last chapter was when he finds out he has to go sit by himself. Right, he has to sit at the steps, which is obviously upsetting to him. So what you're noticing is, as these chapters progress, things just kind of continue to spiral downward for him. Right, he's just not getting the same privileges that he's used to. All right, chapter 5. Luke ate every meal after that on the bottom step. It became a habit, but a hated one. He never noticed before, but Mother often spoke too softly to be heard from any distance, and Matthew and Mark always made their nasty comments under their breath. So they would start laughing, often at Luke's expense, and he couldn't defend himself because he didn't know what they had said. He couldn't even hear Mother saying, "Now be nice, boys." After a week or two, a lot of the time, he didn't even try to listen to the rest of the family's conversation. So you have an answer to your first question. What is the reason why he is not listening? Does anybody know? Why isn't he listening to the people at the table?
So he can hear their conversation and figure out why he can't go outside.
No. Again, the question is, and again, you should have the questions open. Why is Luke no longer listening to the family?
Because he can't hear them that well?
Yeah, he can't hear them. So he simply can't hear them. So he's like not gonna go crazy trying to listen to them anymore because he can't even hear them. So make sure that you are writing that down. Something that you need to make sure you're doing, which some of you guys are not, is just restating the question. So if I look at the question, it says, "Why doesn't Luke try to listen to the conversations?" You should be writing the reason that Luke does not listen to conversations is. And again, we just went over the correct answer. So make sure you are writing why he is no longer listening. I'll give you guys like, I don't know, a minute to write the answer. Do not waste time. Do you need more time, or are you good? Good? Well,
Good.
Sweet. All right. But even he was curious the hot July day, when the letter arrived from the pigs. Matthew brought the mail in the day from the mailbox at the crossroads a mile away. Luke had never seen them, of course, but Matthew and Mark had told him that there was 3 mailboxes there, one for each of the families that lived on the road. Usually the gardener's mail was just bills with thin envelopes carrying curt orders from the government about how much corn to plant, which fertilizer to use, and where to take their crop when it was harvested. A letter from a relative was a cause to celebrate, and Mother always dropped whatever she was doing and sat down to open it with trembling hands, calling out at intervals, "Oh, Aunt Effie's in the hospital again," or "Oof, Elizabeth's going to marry that fellow after all." Luke almost felt he knew his relatives, though. They lived hundreds of miles away. And, of course, they didn't even know he existed. The letters Mother wrote back painstakingly late at night, when she'd saved up enough money for a stamp, contained plenty of news of Matthew and Mark, but never once had mentioned Luke's name. So again, you can tell that the family doesn't really have money. How do I know that? How do I know they don't have money?
Because she didn't have enough money to get a stamp in the morning.
Right. Exactly right. So they can't afford a stamp, and stamps are not very expensive. So the fact that they can't afford a stamp shows you that they really don't have much money at all. The letter was as thick as some from Luke's grandmother, but it bore an official seal, and the return address was embossed Department of Human Habitation, Environmental Standards Division. Matthew held the letter at arm's length, the way Luke had seen him hold dead baby pigs when they had carried it out to born. So he's holding this letter. This basically what he's doing is holding the letter away from himself, like it's something that is dead, and like he doesn't want to be around. Obviously, because he probably knows that this letter includes bad news. That's why he's doing that. Dad looked worried the minute he saw the letter in Matthew's hand. Matthew put the letter down beside Dad's silverware. Dad sighed. Silverware is another word for what? Let's see if anybody knows what that word means. What is silverware another word for?
Fork and like knife.
Yeah, forks and knives, right? Things that you eat with is silverware. Can't be anything bad news, Dad said. No use ruining a good meal. It can wait. So he doesn't want to get upset. So he's waiting until he's done eating. He went back to eating chicken and dumplings. Only after his last belch did he turn the envelope over and run a dirt-rimmed fingernail under the flap. He unfolded the letter. It has come to our attention, he read aloud. Well, so far as I understand it. Then he read silently for a while, calling out at intervals. Mother, what a fault, and where's the dictionary? Matthew looked up reciprocity. Finally he threw down the whole thick packet and proclaimed, They're going to make us get rid of our hogs. What? Matthew asked, more serious than Mark. He had talked for as long as anyone could remember. When I get my own farm, it's going to be all hogs. I'll make the government let me do that somehow. Now he looked over at Dad's shoulder. You mean they're just going to make us sell a lot one at a time, right? But we can build the herd back up. Nope, Dad said. Those people in those fancy houses won't be able to stand the pig smell, so we can't raise hogs no more. He threw the letter out into the center of the table for all to see. What do they expect building next to a farm? From his seat on the stairs, Luke had told himself back from going to the fish edge the letter out of the chicken gravy and look at it himself. They can't do that, can they? He asked. Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. Luke felt like a fool for asking as soon as the words were out of his mouth. For once, he was glad of his hiding place. Mother twisted a dish rag in her hand. Those hogs are our bread and butter. That's an idiom. An idiom is like a phrase that has like a special meaning. Who knows what if I say something's our bread and butter? What does that mean? Does anybody know what that expression means? This is my bread and butter.
One of your more important things.
So, what did you say? So, Sidra, what did you say first? Let's see what both of you guys said.
I said it was like one of your more important things.
Close. What did you say?
It's your everything.
Yeah, kind of like it's kind of almost like a combination of your ideas. It's what you rely on for everything. Yeah. So your bread and butter is what you rely on. So the hogs is what this family is relying on. Obviously, for what? Money, right? With grain prices the way they are, what are we going to live on? Dad just looked at her. After a moment, so did Matthew and Mark. Luke did not know why. Why do you think they're looking at the mother? What is the reason why they're looking at my mother? Why are they looking at the mother? No idea? Well, you will be finding out soon enough. Chapter 6. The tax bill arrived 2 weeks later, the day that Dad, Matthew, and Mark loaded the hogs onto the livestock trailer and took them all away. So, you guys are probably not aware of this, but if you own land or property, you have to pay taxes on it every year. So they're getting their tax bill. Most were going to the slaughterhouse. They're talking about the pigs here. The ones too young and too small to bring a decent price were going to an auction for feeder pigs. Luke watched through the vent at the front of the house as Dad drove by in the battered pickup with each load. Matthew and Mark sat in the back of the pickup, making sure the trailer stayed hitched right. Even 3 stories up, Luke could see Matthew's hangdog expression. So again, Matthew really wanted to take care of these pigs. So the fact that they can't do it anymore is upsetting him. All right, let me just make sure. I think actually there might be a question that we skipped that I forgot you guys had. Yeah, so we didn't answer this one. Make sure that you are doing that now. Why does the Garner family have to sell their pigs? will give you guys a minute to answer that. Make sure you rephrase the question, so you should be writing the reason the Garners have to sell their pigs is because, and then whatever the answer is. True that. All right. Do you need more time? Good. All right. So the tax bill arrived 2 weeks later. That day, Dad, Matthew, Mark. Okay, this guy has his hangdog expression. All right. Then, when the three of them came into the house for dinner after washing the last of the hog smell off their hands in the mudroom, Dad handed Mother the tax bill without comment. She put down the wooden spoon she'd been using to stir the stew and unfolded the letter. Then she dropped it. If she's dropping it, what does that tell you?
That she's shocked about it.
Yeah, exactly right. Bad news, shocking.
Wait,
something.
Mister, I gotta say something.
What's up?
This?
Yes.
Remember when you said find the what is it, character versus something?
Yes.
I found it.
What would you say this would be?
Character versus society and character versus self.
Yeah, right. So most of the things that Luke are dealing with are his self, right? He's dealing with his own stresses. But the bulk of what's going on here so far has been a lot of character versus society stuff going on, right? The government is changing things for this family. Why? She seemed to be doing the math in her head as she bent to retrieve it. That's 3 times what it usually is. There must be a mistake. Yeah, so that's like super ridiculous, right? So every once in a while, tax bills increase for people who own houses or whatever. But for it to triple is insane, right? It's like ridiculous, the amount of money that they're asking for now. Dad shook his head grimly. No mistake, I talked to Williker at the auction. The Willikers were their nearest neighbors, with a house 3 miles down the road. Luke always pictured them with monster scales and fierce claws because the number of times he'd been cautioned, "You don't want the Willikers to see you." Dad went on, "The Willikers say they raised everyone's taxes because of those fancy houses. It makes our land worth more." "Isn't that good?" Luke asked eagerly. It was strange. He should hate the new houses for replacing the woods and forcing him to stay indoors. But he'd had fallen in love with them, having watched every foundation poured, every wooden skeleton of walls and roofs raised to the sky. They were his main entertainment, aside from talking to Mother when she came upstairs for what she called my Luke breaks. Sometimes she pretended his room needed cleaning as badly as the bread needed baking, or the garden needed weeding. Sometimes she just sat and talked. Dad was shaking in his head in disgust over Luke's question. "No, it's only good if we're selling, and we ain't. All it means for us is the government thinks they can get more money out of us." Matthew was slumped in his chair at the table. "How are we going to pay?" he asked. "That's more than we got for all of the hogs, and that was supposed to carry us through for a long time." Dad didn't answer. Even Mark, who normally had a smart alecky comeback for everything, was stupefied. Mother had turned back to her stew. "I got my work permit today," she said softly. "The factory's hiring. If I get on there, I can maybe get an advance on my paycheck." Luke's jaw dropped. Why is his jaw dropping? Why did Luke's jaw drop?
Mister,
Cousin surprise.
Yeah, what's he shocked about?
He's shocked about that his dad might get a raise.
No, that's not what's going on there. Something else is going on there.
Because his mom's getting a job?
Yeah,
He
his
won't be
mom's
able to
getting a
hear?
job. Yeah, so if his mom's getting a job, how does that affect him? If if his mom's going
No
to
more mommy time and more
Yeah.
money.
Exactly right. So, well, positives, more money for their family, but basically, Luke will be
Less time with their kids.
exactly. Luke will be more isolated. He's already isolated. You can't go to work, he said. Who will? He wanted to say. Who will stay with me? Who will I talk to all the day when everybody else is outside? But that seemed too selfish. Luke looked around. No one else looked surprised by Mother's news. He shut his mouth. Right, so again, at the very end here, you're noticing character versus self, him trying to deal with his own emotional responses. All right, so what you're going to do, make sure you finish the last two questions about the chapter. So why was she upset? And then what is Luke's mom planning on doing? And then the very next thing that you will be working on are your flashcards, which I don't probably expect you to finish to this period. You might though, actually. There's a lot of time left. If you need help or you have preguntas, let me know.